Yo, thank you for joining us today. We talking about strikes in Oakland, surprise, surprise, and also if universities are still worth it. It's still worth it to get a college education. Come on back with us.
Audio Jungle.
Welcome back to another episode of South Star Classroom. That's Omar. That's David. I am Charles, and we are so happy to be with you all today. I am on the road. Obviously, I'm not. Well, I guess it's technically the road. It's my actual office, just in a different state. But I'm happy to see y'all, man. And I skipped check-in last time because I'm just
is the
a deviant.
music playing?
You said what? Nobody can hear me?
No, we're good.
Oh, okay. I thought I was like, no, don't tell me there's a tech issue. But I wanted to
No.
No, he was
music
saying
is playing on my computer.
Oh, I can't hear anything from you.
You can't hear
Well,
it? Okay.
But I will say, David, how are you doing, man? What's new with you, brother?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm excited about today's topics. Let's see. Regarding check-in, we're getting close to summer. We're right in that pre kind of late spring, early summer. So looking forward to a jump in the weather. I got outside today, put some time in on the mountain bike, so I'm feeling pretty good and rested. And a quick little story. This is something that when I do school pickup in the afternoons. My son normally stays for the after school program at his middle school, and there's this interaction, this exchange that I generally see when I'm there to pick him up. It's a student at his school that has some kind of visual impairment, might be partially blind or fully blind. I'm not sure. But when I'm there to pick up, the student's parent is there to pick up, and the staff from the school, I'm pretty sure it's the after school program, walk this young student to the car and do the physical handoff with the parent. They exchange some words, and then the parent and the student drive off, and I see this, and every time I see it, it reminds me, it touches my heart, because so many times on the show and in our work, we look at the areas that need growth and improvement. We look at big data sets, and we forget that there are, individual and teams of really good people working in our schools, and they're caring for some of our students that require very careful and gentle, and sometimes intense care. And so I see this guy. And so last week I saw him, the school worker, and I just called him over, and I said, thank you for what you do, man. Thank you for what you do every day. I don't need to know who you are. You don't need to know who I am, but I'm just telling you, man, your work really matters. And the guy kind of teared up, and so did I. And I was like, yeah, just I don't want to lose those moments. So when I see them, I try and memorialize them. I try and connect with people, or make a note on the show or something like that. So that's it, man. Just going into this Friday with that kind of feeling. We'll start dunking on schools pretty soon, but right now I'm feeling good.
They don't need to dunk on schools. We just got some topics coming up, man. See, that's how we get those rumors started about us being school bashers, brother. Omar, how you doing, man? Talk to the good people.
Wait, there's rumors about us being school bashers? Word?
No, man.
That's crazy. What up, everybody? Good to see you this week. Thank you for joining us. This week's been pretty good. We're in testing. So testing is usually an extraordinarily difficult and kind of chaotic scenario. This is our second year with high school, so we're getting attuned to the difficulties that are encumbered in high school testing. But in addition to working with all the school folks, I've been doing a lot of self help, man. Just a ton of reflection on things that I've been dealing with that are, finally surfacing, and, whether it be a, complex or something that happened during childhood. And it's cool because it's not only incredibly liberating to figure out why do we do certain things that we do, but it helps immensely in the discovery of that, especially as a manager in working with others, because it's like, how do my actions affect all the actions of all the other adults in the room that then affect the actions of kids? So the moral of the story, the Aesop's moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, is like therapy and all those wonderful things are so great because it's not just positive for you, it's positive for everybody around you, and exceptional for the work that we do with kids. So
That's
it's been a
what's
good
up,
week,
man.
man. Thanks, brother.
Yeah,
These are different check-ins, man. Y'all just got deep. I'm fine. I just had some traveling. Had to give a talk last night. I'm here today. Looking forward to my book club meeting tomorrow. Asa Hilliard is very dense reading at times, but I respect the OG, and I'm excited to be talking about these topics. And as I teased, there's two things that we're discussing. One, there's a threat of a teacher strike that's been authorized in a certain city, and Dave is going to take us there. And then afterwards, man, we got to have a conversation about universities and its utility with some of the issues that they're having. So David, I will kick it off to you, brother. What are we talking about, man? And what's going on?
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. And so just quickly before we do that, I want to just go back and touch on what Omar shared. I mean, Omar, I'm glad that you're doing that kind of introspection work. I think it's really important for everybody. But it's amazing when you work in schools and when you're in a leadership position, how much of your mental health, whether it be positive or whether it not be in a good space, projects out into the world. And people they pay so much attention to everything that you do, everything that you say, how you say it, when you say it. People really that's like the pressure piece of it. People, it's like, oh, I remember when you said this, and you're like, I said that, or did I say that?
I don't even remember.
That's not what I meant. And so it's just about you can kind of fake it from time to time because everybody gets tired.
Oh, see, you got him too deep, brother. You got him too deep,
man.
And then we lost him. This is your fault, Omar. You know what I'm saying?
Man, listen, man. I'm
all
about getting that deep, man.
You're here audio-wise, not visually. You know what I'm saying? Because Omar then got you off the man.
I'm back. Sorry. No, I forgot to turn my phone off. I just got a phone call from China. That's weird. Anyways, your words matter, how you say things, all these things. And so, but if you're not good inside, it's going to show up on the outside. So I think the work that you're doing is important, and I'm glad that you're doing it.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah. I don't know who was trying to call me from China. Well, let's see. I'm going to look out the windows now.
Scammers,
General
brother.
Mao?
Scammers are trying to call you from China.
Okay. All right. So we are, and it's interesting that, Charles, you happen to be there in Oakland right now. We're talking about Oakland, California again. And the potential, it's actually, I don't even think it's a threat now. The teachers union has voted to authorize a strike. So it's like they've got the card, and they are ready to go. I just got an update from the school district. They said that it's like now they're in the, imagine running a school district and you're saying, we can confirm that school is happening on Monday. And that's all that we can tell you. We look forward to seeing, our community. They're in a very tough spot because it's like, maybe there's no school Tuesday or maybe Wednesday. So there's a threat for a strike. It's about money again and so-called working conditions. This is probably the third strike, whether legal or illegal, in Oakland in the last couple of years. And it all comes on the back of the extended school closures as a result of COVID, right? So like these kids have been shut out of their schools. Some people say, hey, schools didn't shut down. It was just the brick and mortar, and I'm like, well, in my case, and my kid was in OUSD when COVID happened, everything shut down. I know a lot of the charter networks and some districts are able to figure it out quickly, but when COVID shut down our schools, like we got nothing. and my kid had an IEP. We got nothing. So I'll leave that there, because that was our experience. And since then, they've gone on like a wildcat strike, and now they're threatening to close the schools down again, over money. And it's very interesting because it's gotten me thinking about like what happened during COVID, the school closures, who got to decide, whose lead were we taking, and you follow this process, right? It's always bargaining and negotiations happening between the union and management. And in this case, management is not like some Wall Street banker. Management is a homegrown, from the community, African-American woman named Kyla Tramell Johnson, who's probably has the longest tenure of any Oakland superintendent, maybe going back, I don't even know, Charles, like maybe 50 years. She's been there for a long time.
She's been there for
they used to
a minute
be in and
now.
out every like 2 years, right? They used to be in and out. And so she's like of the community, from the community. So she is effectively like, in terms of, when you think about the union dynamics, you have to have a villain, the boss, right? And it's like in Monopoly, it's the large man, the fat man with the hat on, with the stick.
Right.
Well, that's her. And so I'm thinking like, okay, say, well,
We just compared her to the Monopoly man.
yeah.
Well, he said no.
Right?
Well, we love Kyla. I think what he's saying is like that's how
yeah.
they're looking at her. Like she's like
That's the
holding all
perception.
Yes,
that person represents
Ah.
power and money and like the fat
Right.
cats, right? And like and I think
Absolutely.
what you're driving
You gotta
home
have-
is
you gotta
that
have a
That's
target.
helpful
Yeah, she's
for me.
homegrown.
That's helpful for me. All right.
Yeah,
all right.
no, I'm not comparing. No, not
no,
at all.
we both know Kyla very well.
Okay.
I used to
Damn.
work when I was a pup, man. I came up around
Almost
and
trying to
under
get me in
Kyla,
trouble.
man. And
Okay.
Kyla's incredible actually, and just
no, so, I mean, like figuratively, she sits in that seat, right?
Right.
And it's difficult because I can imagine if the superintendent of Oakland were an oversized white man who wore a hat and that kind of a suit, they'd be like knocking down his door, right? But they're not, because she's not that kind of a target. And so I'm like, who's the actual target? Is it the board? The board is there. The board is mainly this current board.
it's their board.
It's their board. They are elected majority by the union. You have a superintendent. So I'm like, it's that Spider-Man meme where everyone's like, and so, but here we are. They voted to authorize a strike. And you want to talk about like teacher unions that talk about the importance of having democratically elected school boards and community public schools. And then we're going to take a secret vote. And like, a couple of journalists put this out in Oakland. They're like, oh, the union authorizes the strike. I'm like, have you independently verified in 2023 the results of the vote? Do you have any voter data? No, this is what the union told us. I'm like, okay, are we still doing this now? Right? It's like, we've gone through all this voting stuff and we still haven't figured out how to add some kind of transparency to a simple thing like a vote for a teachers union when they are going to authorize or not authorize a strike. Even like, what is the language of the question, right? And oftentimes these questions that they pose on ballots are very leading. They're very leading. I haven't seen this exact language, but I've heard it's extremely leading and confusing. All that to be said, they're looking at another shutdown possibly next week for who knows how long. It's going to impact everybody. Imagine if you were a senior and you've got you're working on your grades, you're trying to finish, you might be taking the AP exams that happen in school. You might be taking other kinds of, assessments. And, you might need information from your teachers regarding your college applications and all of these things, right? Imagine if you're a special education student who requires, care from specialists in school and your parents work. What do? Do you just stay home, right? This is what we learned during the pandemic. It's like when kids are home, they require supervision. And so many children, vulnerable children, did not have access to supervision during the pandemic, causing another pandemic of behavioral, social, emotional damage that was caused to children as a result of not being able to attend schools. But here we are, and I think the question is, somebody had put together a piece that a quote from a Berkeley professor who tend to be very left leaning, but they were reflecting on the pandemic and the school closures, right? And so this individual, and I'm going to leave it here for conversation. This is related. His name is Shamik Dasgupta, and he's out of UC Berkeley, philosophy, metaphysics, ethics, poli-sci guy. He's talking about during the pandemic, it's clear that school closures were a mistake. They harmed children with no measurable effect on the pandemic. The unions were a major factor behind these closures. But remember, unions were just doing their job. This is what they do. This is how they function. So we shouldn't actually be blaming the unions, because the unions protect teachers. That's all that they do. Their remit is to advocate for their members, and that's exactly what they did. Seen like this, the problem was not with the teachers union per se. Personally, this person's in favor of public sector unions, but they say the absence of a comparable organization at the bargaining table to represent the interests of students and their caregivers was an issue. It was a failure of a democratic decision-making process. And that's where we are here with this strike. So the question is, who gets to decide if we're going to shut schools down again around teacher salaries? Do parents get any say? Does the community get any say? Do the elected officials get any say? Do families get any say? That's my question to both of you.
You got any questions or anything, Omar? As you dive in, I'll go to you first, brother.
I mean, I'm on mute. Yeah,
no, you're not. We can hear you.
I got a lot of questions, and I think I have a lot of trepidations about this, simply because one of the things that I read in the article that I need some clarity on, David, that you probably know better than I. What's the difference between a legal strike and an illegal strike? What does it take to have a legal strike?
An illegal strike is just an illegal strike. It's called a wildcat strike, and it's illegal, but there's no repercussions for it, right? A legal strike has to go through. They have to prove in some way, shape, or form that they are at something called an impasse, right? So we're at an impasse. We've been meeting, for a week, and we're not getting anywhere. But you have to follow, certain steps in order to get there, right? And it sounds like maybe they got there, maybe they didn't. Here's the thing: we don't know, because negotiations are closed door. They're closed to the public, right? So nobody really knows. Both sides can spin it. There is an entity, Omar, that kind of oversees, and I don't know if it's beyond California, but there is an entity that oversees kind of the management of public sector unions. So this is like the body that you would go to if you're trying to contest a strike or contest the legality of a strike. And the organization is called, let me just look this up real quick. I don't know if I don't have it right now. It's the Public Employees Relations Board, PERB, right? So this is the board that kind of reviews any challenges from like the school district or other public agencies around the legality of a strike. And so the district challenged the strike, and PERB sent it back saying it's a legitimate strike. But when you look at the composition of the organization PERB, it's essentially a bunch of people that are exist in union labor circles. So I'm like, the shit is stacked. It's stacked. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
And this is why you asked the question of like, this sounds like a close-knit group of people who are meeting behind closed doors, who lack a transparency with our families, with our kids, who are making decisions that will directly impact our kids and our families without any of their involvement whatsoever. And these are the people that scream about like democratic transparency left and right. And they are getting together, and the fundamentals of whether or not it is legal or unlegal, I think, are being clarified right now. But then they're making these determinations without any input from the community. That's really what you're getting into right now, right? David is saying there's a lack of transparency that are affecting the lives of others.
Yep.
And it's kind of like, I guess my question is, who then bequeathed all this power to who that has that dramatic effect? Because we elected our representatives, we elected our presidents, we elected our school board, and we essentially in those elections, there is an acquiescence of saying, we've elected you to be the people who are making these difficult decisions by a public vote. So who elected these cats, and why do they have all this power?
Yeah, I mean, it's a chicken or the egg. The only reason so many of these people get elected, at least so this is very much like a California, it could be a New York, it could be a Pennsylvania. These are like blue state matters. And I know in Texas it functions differently, but you're talking about politicians that receive, millions of dollars collectively from public sector unions, right? We're talking about every employee pays a due. Those dues go to like legal funds. Those dues also go to running the infrastructure of a union, because the union is its own entity. And it's interesting. I think the AFT recently, or maybe the NEA, the people that work at one of these top national teacher unions, I think a couple of years ago, actually unionized themselves, and they went on strike against the organization that is the union. Anyhow,
damn.
Yeah. And so I think the answer to your question is it's interest. It's an interest group, infinite loop, where I'm a politician. We elect politicians. Politicians get elected based on who funds them. The public sector unions fund them. So, they're going to naturally protect their interests, right? Again, it's like holding. It's like a firewall, and on the other side of the firewall are children and families and communities that have zero say.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Charles, I know I'm asking all these questions and stuff.
You are.
Yeah. Go ahead, brother.
I don't realize.
No, go ahead. Well, it's good that you're asking them, because you are you represent.
I'm the common man here.
Yeah, you're doing the common man's work. So you're good. Go ahead.
No, okay. So I think then it begs the question of what you're bringing up, which is essentially that what is this group striking about? Is it about teacher pay? Is it about hours? Is it about, what is it that they're striking about? Because if I don't know, then the kids and the parents don't know. And if the kids and parents don't know, how are they supporting these things for teachers versus being the recipient of what looks like, actions that will support the teacher, but harm the kids and the parents?
Yeah.
And, I shoot that to both of y'all.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some of the I'll call it propaganda that, they're using to do like teach-ins around the strike. And it's basically around more money for teachers, which I agree with. But again, going back to our earlier show, if you're going to get more money, like how are we shifting accountability? And then we've talked about this before in Oakland too, is a moratorium on school closures. And I'm like, you have too many schools. It's costing you too much money. You're not running a smart business, because you're still a business. And that's why you can't pay your teachers what they deserve. It's mind-boggling. Like, if anybody from the outside that has any kind of a basic like awareness of budget or business would look at this and be like, yeah, this is a very inefficient system. So your solution is to pump more money into it. I don't get it. Charles, we've been taking up too much time.
I mean, it's all good, man. I think when you talk about who gets to vote on this issue, there were some very important things said, and I want the people listening to take these with it, right? I have always said this, and I'm glad that this person said something very similar. I need you to understand what a union's job is. A union of any sort they have a client that they're supposed to look after. So in a teacher's union, Their job is to advocate on behalf of teachers. Now, I don't care what they say. They might be saying there's some messaging that's saying we're doing this for the community, we're doing this for students, or whatever the case is. But their job is to advocate for their client, which is the teachers. And it raises a really important point, because to answer this question, who gets to vote when teachers union strike? Teachers. That's it. And a lot of them don't vote, just FYI. Parents and students do not have voting power, which is why it's like, listen, as somebody who does respect the entity that is unions and knows how important they are to this country, I am telling you that there needs to be some type of apparatus, some type of structure in place where where parents and students and rogue teachers that don't agree with these things that are happening need to be able to have the power to organize and to push back and to make their own demands, because none of these demands are tied to let's say achievement. None of these demands are tied to how well students are learning. It's usually about somebody's money and how less somebody gets to work. And I will just say, this is one of those places where I'm from and where I love, and I will rep to the day I die. But these people always do find a way to get out of work. Now, I'm not blaming teachers. There are a lot of great teachers in Oakland, a lot. You can see even some of the heartbreak, some of the confusion of some of the teachers on their own Facebook pages as they're trying their best to communicate with their parents about what might happen, what might not happen. And there's pressure on you as a teacher. Let's say you don't want to strike. That could be bad for you if you don't in that teacher's lounge. So that would be my piece on there. But my dear and lovely beloved Oakland, I swear it feels like every other week we are talking about a strike. And it's like, yo, man, I think that there needs to be a parent and student strike at some point that demands better quality, because none of this stuff, by the way, fixes the structural deficit that this district will continue to be in. For you all that don't, so there will be an infusion of cash from somewhere, and this will be in the next part as well. But if I make $5, but I spend $7 every single month, even if David and Omar say, Charles, you're down bad, here go $20, but I don't change anything else, I don't get rid of anything else, I don't bring my expenses under $5, guess what? I will end up right back in this situation where parents and students unfortunately have to bear the brunt of a strike.
And I've talked about this thing before on the show. I'm gonna put pen to paper, or chat GPT to paper, around this idea of like natural accountability, because like where I live in the district that we're at now, again, going back to COVID, when my kid was at home, but only could access his physical school like 2 days a week and only in the afternoons. At that same time, when I came down to register him down here, they were open full time. And I was like, why? What is so different about here and there? And so the point being, it's the school district like Oakland, the teachers union like Oakland, a high percentage do not live and they're not from the community. So you have this break, right? This is that people come in. It's very similar to the police department situation in Oakland, where most of the cops don't live in Oakland. And so they have no problem coming in and causing mayhem in the community. So this is very similar. And I know people in labor circles are like, oh, police unions aren't unions. Bullshit, they're unions. It's the same. You don't have, the workers don't have a direct connection to the community. And so flicking the switch on a strike is a lot easier because you don't have to go home at the end of the day to face your neighbors, to talk to them about how their children struggle today because they were at home all day unsupervised, not able to attend their schools because of the shutdown, right? And so I'm going to leave that there. I'm fired up.
I mean, you are, man.
Yeah, man. Go ahead, O.
No, I was just going to say, I empathize with teachers trying to ensure that they are, as people and expenses come about, look, EPISD had this whole funny situation where they approved the construction of the superintendent's office, and East Leda did something very similar. And you're talking about, I'm not lying, fellas, like hundreds of thousands of dollars to improve the office of the superintendent. You're talking about like matrix like glass where you press a button and it gets like, you know, frosted, and you press another button, it doesn't get unfrosted. And I'm sitting here cracking up because like someone was asking me about my office, and I'm like, give me the smallest little thing. I don't really need an office. My job is to work with the administrators and be on the ground doing these things. The point I'm trying to make is that like, I'm all for these teachers doing this, because the teachers in El Paso were like, how are you justifying hundreds of thousands of dollars to improve the superintendent's office, to make it look like, you know, homeboys living in the Matrix, and we haven't gotten a significant pay raise in years. So I'm all about that. What I'm having a lot of difficulty with and confusion about is why these teachers aren't incorporating parents and students into this scenario to help them understand we are in this collectively together, because this will improve the educational outcomes of our kids in the ability that we'll get to like have a living wage, and it's extremely expensive to live in the Bay Area. And these are things about equity that we're trying to teach students in order to understand the difficulties of the real world. And it's funny because the very people, labor unions, teacher unions that scream for transparency, that scream for the democratic process, that bitch about charter schools because we have like an appointed board versus an elected board, are out doing nefarious things behind closed doors without the incorporation of the very community that they're serving, in order to justify their own gains instead of incorporating the community. And that I don't know, man, it sounds hypocritical, it sounds backwards. So I don't know, Cole, if you feel the same way, but it seems a little weird.
Well, I'm gonna transition us, but I'll land my plane on this one as we go into the next topic, which I don't think is too far off. I would even argue to say, as I end on this topic, that I would add teachers to that group of voiceless students, parents, and community members. I don't think that there are a lot of teachers that are involved in a lot of these decisions. And what I would say is that tide is changing. I do think that they started out with a lot of community support because people are just naturally sympathetic to teachers, right? They know that they don't get paid well. They know that the conditions suck. They know that things could be a lot better. I think that the union is starting to overplay its hand by always striking. And I think that when you have a very liberal professor from one of the most liberal universities in the world that the world has ever seen speak out at the risk of saying anything negative about the institution that is a union, I think you can see that a tide is shifting. And I think that something's going to happen. And so teachers, I will talk to you. If you are a teacher that's frustrated by this and feel like this is kind of hurting the profession or hurting your standing in the community, I don't think you're alone. And I think there are other teachers that are like you. And I think that you have to run for leadership in your union in order to start to change these things, to be in community and in communication with the people that you care about and that you want to educate, while getting the things that you deserve and the conditions that you need to be successful. And with that, I'll transition us into our next topic, right? So there's an article that we read, and it's about Oregon. And basically, there are universities in Oregon are asking for $1 billion so that they can $1 billion. They're asking for $1 billion so they can keep their universities open, to help with tuition, to help with pay, and all these things, right? So I'll just read directly from my notes. Oregon's 7 public universities are seeking over $1 billion of funding for the next 2 years to avoid budget cuts and layoffs and to maintain services amid inflation. Now, here's the thing. This drives us to, a different question, right? This is about universities and the apparatus and system of universities. I am somebody who is a big proponent of college. I'm huge on it. Like college, I've said this before, college has saved my life, but I think that it's starting to fall out of favor. And we talked about that term earlier, structural deficit. Universities are starting to act and move in this structural deficit type of way. So even as Oregon, let's say Oregon gets $2 billion and not just one, in 5, 6, 8 years time, they're going to be back in this same place. But I think that this was a little different from this story from the first one, David and Omar, is that while you by law are required to go to K-12, you are not required to go to universities. You are not required to get a college degree. And a lot of very, very wealthy people, are starting to advocate and bang the drum that college is overpriced, it is underperforming, and it is becoming a relic of what it was. So as somebody who loves that system, I ask you guys, how can the university system save itself? And we'll go in reverse order. We'll start with you, David, and then we'll go there, and let's just have a discussion.
Yeah, great topic and great question. So looking at the article that was about Oregon, but this could have been easily about California or Texas.
Easily.
You know, I don't know what's happening in Oregon per se, but I know here in California in our community colleges, you know, enrollment, the kids have just not come back. So there's this, it's very similar to what we were talking about, where you have a public system that, you know, is not serving as many students as they were pre-pandemic, and yet the fix is to ask for more money to subsidize or uphold a status quo entity. Granted, I attended public university my whole life. It was a life changer for me, but that was not in 2023. It was a very different time. And so the second piece is around this moment. And I think the question is not about, you know, may not be about like the anti-college movement, right? Because I think college definitely still holds a place, but I do think colleges need to reinvent themselves on the whole. Like we have things like, you know, certificate programs or different types of like non-traditional credentialing agencies that are more personalized that exist now. You know, and I think, you know, with the amount of information that we have at our fingertips in terms of content, you know, is college outdated? Yes. Can you get the level of like deep thought conversation and like sit in the, you know, Socratic seminar, you know, on a computer? Maybe not. Maybe that's done in person best. But I think all these things are factors in it. And, you know, these universities are huge bureaucracies, are huge entities that we pulled up. And so I think the question is like, are they too big? Do we need to downsize them, reorganize them? I don't know what the answer is to that, but something different needs to happen. I don't believe in like pouring more money into a system. You know, we're not even talking about like outcomes in public universities in Oregon for Black and brown children. That's a separate thing, right?
I think the question, and like, I know it sounds a bit elementary, but it's not. So as Kamer Seth quoted, you know, I always forget the famous author, what is the point of education? And I think the answer was always education is not the filling of the bucket, but the lighting of the flame. I want to ask you gentlemen, just elementary style, what's the point of college? Like, let's just take a step back and be like, what's the point of college?
Charles. I got a big answer. And I mean, I have a huge answer. That's gonna go into what my response would be. So I'll let you go ahead, David. But cool. But yeah, okay. but you know,
and I definitely have a response to this, but I want to ask you guys first. Like, what's up?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's a couple. There's like the technical piece of that would be to continue with your education in regards to a particular focused area, a technical area that will prepare people for the workforce, right? Not to say those things can't happen in high school, but really like, you know, going to college to, you know, become part of a particular advanced trade is one. And then I think the other piece of it is I mean, there's this whole other piece that we can't quite put our finger on, but like, what is the actual value of a college degree from a particular university that opens doors for people? I mean, having a degree from UCSD for me opened incredible doors. I don't even, you can't put a dollar figure on that, right?
Mhm.
I wouldn't be right here talking with both of you. So there's that, like, I don't know what I don't want to simplify it to say like clout, but like, like I have my
There
degree. That
is.
means like I'm
There
showing
is.
up with something, right? And that gets
Yeah.
me to the front of the line. There's that piece of it. And then, there's the whole other world of, college as a path to, the freeing of the mind through the arts and through philosophy and through discourse. I think, there's a powerful argument there. But I mean, when you talk about the purpose of college, those are the things that come to my mind, without having prepped my response to that
No,
deep
absolutely.
question.
I think it's like, look, I think for our listeners, there's a large cloud about college right now in terms of like, is it even necessary? It's so expensive. The culture wars are colleges are at the pinnacle of that. So I just wanted to take a step back and just examine, like, for three gentlemen who are of minority descent, who grew up, low income, some of us significantly lower than others. College was a ludicrous life changer for us. And I want to add just like a few things and share a quick story before I let Charles just like have at it, because I can see him just
Oh no,
biting at
I'm
the
listening,
chops
man.
of doing
No,
this,
no,
man. I
I'm
love
listening.
it.
I'm just following
Which
where you're going, brother. Go
I
ahead.
love it. Which is there's and look, I'll be selfish because this came out of my alma mater, but Carol Dweck wrote a, now very famous book about the growth mindset, and it was a study done at Stanford. And the ultimate factor was that the brain is evolving all the way through, age 25, deeply evolving through age 25. And those that, the central premise of the book is that those that take intellectual risks can literally grow their IQ. And those that don't can remain stagnant. That's where the growth mindset came from. But the idea is that those who are actively learning, growing, taking risks can further develop their intellect and their brain. And for most kids, college is 18 to 22. And I can tell you definitively that my brain grew exponentially during my college experience, because not only was I dealing with extraordinarily complex issues, but I was dealing with some of the world's most brilliant kids and having to compete at that level, understand at that level, be at that level, and you grow from your peers. And look, there's no one in our audience that can say, hey, when you're with a group of friends that are motivated, that are excited, that are ambitious, that are smart, that you don't grow from that. And you all know when you're hanging out with some group of friends that ain't doing that, you're like, oh, this is the friend group that gets me in trouble. So it's interesting to think about this, but I want to add this quick story to get our readers, or excuse me, our listeners thinking, because this is my take right now on the whole college thing. And it addresses Doc's question of what does a college need to do in order to kind of sustain itself? And I would say it needs to change the trajectory of how it's doing its work.
Mhm.
So this has become a bit of an urban legend, but it's real. It's true. I've now had it verified through several friends and professors. There are these two cats at my alma mater who were frustrated with the old school way of doing things. You're going to go to lecture, you're going to take notes, you're going to go back to your dorm or wherever, you're going to read the things, you're going to go to discussion section, and you're either going to write a paper or do a problem set, and then the process repeats itself and you take a midterm and a final exam, and that's it. That's the experience. It's a lot of listening, it's a lot of reading, then there's some talking, and that's it. And they were adamant that is archaic, it's ridiculous. I don't even think that worked in the early 1900s. Who the hell is this for? And they went to the president of the university being like, you need to completely restructure how the curriculum is taught and how students are participating. The more involvement we have, the more hands-on that we're doing, the more critical thinking that we're doing, the more kind of engineering process of like failing and getting back up from that failure. I feel like that is so much more tied to the neurological pathways of learning that I think this will be a better experience. And, you know, the president at Stanford at the time was like, all right, boys, like, cool. Who are you guys to tell us this? And famously, those two gentlemen were Sergey Brin and Larry Page, and those two cats invented Google. And that's why they were in the president's office to begin with, because they invented Google at Stanford with the ideology of something's got to change. And I think that answers the question, Doc. What have universities become? Because if only they're a place where we are fulfilling a customer service need and acquiescing to a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds and their overly sensitive dispositions, we've lost our way. Versus a pathway of extraordinary thought, challenging neurological dissidence, which is a fancy way of being like challenging your brain to grow, challenging your ideas, challenging your precepts, and getting you to think about the world differently so that you can positively impact the world. Those are diametrically opposed. So want to give you all time and space to be like, what do you think about that? And how does that reflect on what you were going to say?
You go ahead, Dave.
Woo! I shut this down, baby.
Well, I didn't want to just jump into my answer. I wanted to let us, respond to what you were saying. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at this article, and I'm kind of doing a comparative analysis. Even today, the cost of attending a public university in Oregon, I hate to say it, looks pretty affordable, right? Mm-hmm. Compared to California. And so there's that. I think the larger like philosophical question is, I'm thinking about this too, because we're talking about like rising tuition costs, right? We're talking about like, what's the benefit? Mm-hmm. And if we should increase the subsidies, right? But can you name, what are some other like public services that we actually have to pay this crazy amount of money for? Like if something is public, right? It should, maybe shouldn't be free, but it should be very close to free. And so I think on the system side for colleges and universities, there's a lot of work to kind of retool what education looks like, what the programs look like, what the degrees look like. Are we actually preparing young people for work in the real world, right? And that includes like teaching programs, right? Technical programs. Sure, always have room for the arts and all of that, 100%. And then if we can actually do that, like why can't we figure out a way to make the shit free, right?
Well, the master plan, brother.
Right.
The more we do these topics, the more I'm like, just go read the master plan. Like I think that plan was actually beautiful. I don't have much to say about what you said, Omar. I thought it was fine. I think. I don't want to have like hardly answer it. I think in my answer, hopefully my answer to a larger question, I hope I'll touch on some things. I agree with what both you said. But here's what I think. I think that universities play a large societal role. I think higher education as a whole, right? Go back, to ancient philosophy, and I'm even talking about before the Greeks, when they stole the shit from Egypt. I'm sorry, when Egypt invited them in and taught them everything, and then they took it and as if it were their own. But these moments in time are marked as moving society forward, right? Like the intellectual, you need that counterweight. And so when I'm talking about how can the university save itself, I think the university system save itself. I think the first thing is that you have to get your chickens in order as far as like whatever this fiscal model is, it's no longer working. Like it is just not. I'm not saying that university presidents make billions of dollars or whatnot, right. But It is
Close.
the model is antiquated and it needs to be updated. And one would think that the place for thinking and figuring out large problems should be able to figure that out. One would think. So that would be my challenge if you have access to the smartest minds in the world. That's one.
No, they don't want to think themselves out of a job. Go ahead.
Two. I think that the university system has to evolve, but at the same time, it has to reclaim its greatness. It has to reclaim its purpose, and that purpose is a return to rigor, a return to scientific discourse. Before we got on, Omar and I were kind of talking about this, and I was kind of quiet because I'm like, damn, I'm done to talk about that in my answer. So I wasn't trying to play coy. I just didn't want to.
Oh man,
I didn't want to give it all away beforehand. But
don't do it, baby.
But there is something that's changing in universities where a physicist from NY, from a top university that is teaching the laws of physics as a tenured professor is getting pushed out of universities because students are saying that the material is too difficult. It's like this old person who's 70-some years old and this is all they know. This is what they've studied for 50 years. Is like, I'm sorry, there's just universal laws. I don't know. I can't accommodate you at the expense of these intellectual laws. And that doesn't mean that things can't change and be challenged, right? Like, I'm also somebody who grew up Christian, and I remember when I was going off to college and it was like a thing. One, they were proud of me, but two, they were also like, don't be corrupted by this, whatever place or whatever. But I do think that this is where free thinking needs to happen. I think that we entered a dangerous space that the university system was not able to necessarily recover from. So I lean more left. I tend to have more left things, but I don't have a problem with a debate happening between the leftists and the rightists. Like I don't have a problem with the exchange of ideas. The university has to be protected as a sacred intellectual space where ideas and scientific rigor can happen. And finally, I would just say, colleges are not just your kid going to school for 4 years where incredible development can happen. There's a lot of growth that happens. There's also probably a lot of drug use, sex, and stupid decisions. But again, people need those. Society needs certain containers. But what I would say is, your university, I was on a hospital board. That hospital was tied to a university system. So not only were we a hospital, but we were a teaching hospital, meaning that we were training the next crop of doctors. We were trying to, make sure we're solving certain diseases and things like that. Like, there are so many things around in a university. There's so many communities. Dr. Howard Fuller did a lot of his work, his groundbreaking work around school choice, out of the center that he created in partnership with Marquette. So these institutions are major pieces of our society. Now, whether you want to send your kids to college or not, that's your business. I actually don't have a thought on that at all. But if the university system wants to preserve itself, it has to make itself, it has to stand its ground while being more affordable and at the same time being a place that people want to go and be challenged. There's a reason why people would follow Socrates around while he spoke, right? Like, there's a reason, I don't want to, mix up the great philosophers, right? But there was something in there. And I feel like if that bastion actually is destroyed, I think that it would have major repercussions that people are not even thinking about. I mean, if you want to talk about the Crusades, I'm not trying to, but here's the thing, and I'll end on this. How many people out there even know what I'm talking about when I say the Crusades and what happened in those times, right? So, this is why when we talk about the dilution of education, it's not just in K-12. It's not happening. It is happening from pre-K all the way to post-doc stuff, where we are going softer. We are not sticking to morals. We are getting dumber, I think, in a lot of different ways. And societies tend to pay the price when they reach a level of hubris and they stop learning. They lose pieces of themselves. Every great empire that is fallen, you can track when those moments start to happen. And when they were falling,
they didn't know they were falling. Right?
Exactly.
You don't know it's
You
falling.
don't know it till you know it. You don't know that you have fallen
Yeah.
until you are yelling "Et tu, brute!" Like that's when you know. Like Caesar didn't know it was over until his best friend fucking stabbed him. So
yeah, man.
So
Literally.
that's what I think the conversation needs to be around universities, and I do think they are very important. As I am somebody who owes damn near, who is well into six figures of owing them back, and that part sucks. But I still understand and see the utility in this system, even though I have issues with it. I think they could do a lot better. It did essentially save my life, and you would not know Dr. Charles Cole III at all had I not gone that route. So universities, get your shit together and utilize some of the greatest minds of all time to figure this out. So, anyway, I think these were two really good topics today, man. I think that one, I just think y'all are brilliant. Omar, you took us on some journeys, and I appreciate it, man. Like I think that your storytelling just around that and that grounding, you should probably be a university. You would be a fun professor because you would have these stories throughout, and because you have Stanford and Harvard behind your name, it probably won't be very difficult if you want to make that move. But let's throw it to you first.
He has two clouds. You got two clouds.
Exactly.
Oh man,
exactly.
I also appreciate the way that you said Harvard, because
it's
you didn't
Harvard.
say Harvard. You're like Harvard.
It's Harvard.
It's like Harvard.
It's Harvard. You know where I went? Cal State Hayward. So they don't ring out the same. But I'm very proud of my education and my academic attainment, man. But why don't you lead us off in the final thoughts? Because they're gonna kick me out this room because I only paid for the hour.
Indeed, and I gotta get out of here. I'll make mine quick, which is I really appreciated what Doc said about what the university experience was like for him. And he brought up so many good points about there is a place and time, even now, as kids are growing into adults, that they have a bit of a safety net to deal with circumstances that they have not dealt with and freedom that they've not dealt with in order to grow both physically and mentally and spiritually. But let us not forget that universities oftentimes are the bastion of incredible research.
Right.
And this is where we're trying to solve the world's problems. It's like kids are in a place where a professor is solving some of the biggest problems and learning and adding to how to solve the issues. And I think that there's a fundamental problem when people are saying you need to make this easier, because it's like, that's not the point of what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to solve the most complex issues so that we make society better. And you're absolutely right about the hubris, which is if this becomes a situation of just serving the customer versus the very intelligent people that see a 30, 50, 100-year trajectory and say, you're worried about your next 4 years. We're trying to solve the complex issues of the next 100 years here. And I'm sorry that we can't kowtow to you and your kegger and whatever difficulty you're having in particle physics right now. We have some much bigger fish to fry. And I think if universities acquiesce to the student too much, they'll have lost their way and lost their purpose. And I think that in turn loses the respect factor of why they exist in the first place, thus making people not choose to go there.
Thank you, brother.
Can I jump in, Charles?
All you, brother. Your final thought. Do your thing.
It's actually like right on the tail end of what Omar shared about. So we're talking about like a big, large public university system that is asking for more money. At the end of the day, it's tied to like how many people show up. And so we kind of touched on it. We touched on like the purpose of college. We touched on the idea, which I agree with, that where colleges are like our, they are the centers where we continue to grow and define and advance culture, right? And culture, on either side, technology, advancements of how we live, science, all these things. This is the bubble where it happens. But what we didn't talk about, and what I've experienced and what I know is a big conversation now is, if colleges and universities want to save themselves from themselves, it's this like pendulum that we're on right now around, that's so far to the left in universities, and even like red states, right, where everything is like so far to the left. The conversations, it's very much like groupthink, similar to what we talked about earlier, like in the teacher union vote. If you're going to vote against the union, you're going to be chastised, right? And similar like groupthink in universities now, that is well documented. I've experienced it too. And I think, if colleges are going to really save themselves from themselves, and we got to get back to a place where our public and private universities are a place where we can have open dialogue on, with competing ideas, right? And arguments to really, fundamentally better understand who we are as a people. And I feel like we've lost that right now, and it's really pushing a lot of people away from sending their kids to college, because they kind of know what to expect. And people just don't want that for their kids. They want a more like well-rounded educational experience for their kids, be it exposure to conservative ideas or liberal ideas, right? That's what you want. You want to expose. This is like teaching. Put out the information, put out the facts, put out information, and then let people make meaning of it, right? But don't lead from the left or the right. And I feel like that's a big thing. And maybe it's what's happening in the colleges in Oregon. I don't know. But I'll leave it there. Thank you. Good topic, Charles. Thank you.
Oh man, no problem, brother. And I'll just do my final thought, here. I think I'm gonna combine the two. I think that today we talked about and scratched on some major institutions that I don't have ill feelings towards. I just think that they are somewhat losing their way and losing the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. I think that unions, the powers of unions, like the importance, the like the spiritual meaning like behind this and what this has meant in this country, and what it's probably meant for families like mine, even though it does have its roots in super racist roots, but most things in this country do, all the way to David has talked about his family's history with Cesar Chavez or just like, just the rights that come with that. I think the entity that is that we are in danger of like just really losing in a way that's really profound, and I don't think we're really paying attention to, is just this dwindling of academic and educational utility. We should be, these kids are so far behind, we can't afford to just be like them to be missing time. Like, our universities' values are dropping so crazy that we should damn near make it almost free and be welcoming and finding the best minds. And we should be finding and carving out new departments because there's new thinking that's coming here.
Exactly.
We should be problem solvers. We are talking about two different entities that are rooted in education that are not showing any smarts or intelligence at all. And it's like, teachers union, use some of that thinking, let's figure out ways to solve these problems, because there's not a them us if we keep doing this them us thing, because when societies fall, it's all gone. There are no more ancient Romans left, man. It's gone. The great dynasties of Egypt, of ancient China, when they're gone, they take everybody, regardless of where you fell on that. So we are at that nexus. We are at the precipice of that nexus where we need to start answering these difficult questions, not just to win the argument, but for our collective survival and intelligence. And so we can have something greater for everybody in the future. Omar had to dip. That's David. I'm Charles, and we will see you all next time. Y'all have a good one. Hope you enjoyed the show. Share it with somebody and leave us a comment. Peace.